that time of the week again. It is time to make another vegan baking video, and this week I'm going to be making vegan Afghan cookies, or Afghan biscuits as we call them. If you're not too familiar with what they are like a chocolate cookie, a crumbly kind of cookie, and generally they have cornflakes, so corn crispy cereal, mixed through them at the very last second, which makes them nice and crunchy and crispy. Gives a little bit of extra texture when you bake them. However, we're going to be baking them without cornflakes. Today I'm going to be making them with wheat biscuits. We have a brand here in New Zealand called weetbix, like this, and they have like a rugby team and they're promotional and everything like that. I'm going to be using these. Yeah, but you can also use cornflakes, and that would be easier to turn it into a gluten-free recipe if you were to use cornflakes, from my understanding. Yeah, but without any further ado, we're going to get into the video. One other thing is that they are generally iced with a little bit of chocolate icing and topped with half a walnut. If you have a nut allergy, you can completely omit this, just do the icing. Or you could even put like a little bit of coconut, a desiccated coconut on top or something like that. But without any further ado, we're going to get into the baking part of this video. So this video does require a stand or cake mixer. Well, it doesn't require it, it just is a hell of a lot easier if you have one to use. So that's what I'm going to be using. However, you can beat the butter into it by hand. It just might take a long time and you can have a very sore arm afterwards. But this recipe also requires scales and a cup measurement. So you're going to start with 200 grams of vegan butter. I'm going to be using Liviani. There we go, that is 200 grams. If you're going to be using table spread like I am, I recommend going for, it doesn't have to be a high quality brand, but a decent quality. Don't cheap out on the butter, as I learned the hard way, because sometimes it just doesn't work. Next up, you're going to want to add in some sugar. You can use raw sugar if you'd like. I'm going to be using white sugar. You're only going to need half a cup. Perfect. Which is roughly another 105 grams. You're then going to add a teaspoon of vanilla essence, and I finally got some, so we're going to add it in. I don't generally measure this, but you can also use the cap as a measurement if you don't feel like getting a teaspoon out. And then you're going to need a paddle attachment. This one's really cool because it's got the silicone edges, so you don't have to scrape down the edges as much, but whatever you have will work. We're going to put it in. Then we cream the butter and sugar until light and fluffy, and I'll show you what it looks like after I'm done. So when you're done, your mixture should look something like this. Maybe not identical depending on the brand of butter you're using, but it should be really pale, soft. You should be able to see the sugar less, and it should be nice, light and fluffy looking and creamy. Right, next up, you're going to want to add in 1¼ cup, of plain flour and 1/4 cup of cocoa. The best way to do this would be to put it in a bowl and mix it together and then sift it. However, I don't have a sift, so I'm just going to add it straight in. The purpose of sifting is to add in some more air and make it lighter and fluffier. However, you may do with what you've got. If you don't have one, you're more than welcome to do the same thing I'm doing. It'll come out with the same result, just less air in the cookie. So that's 1 cup. I'm just going to make sure I put it in even-ish places around the mixer. Then we need 1/4 cup of flour. You're also going to want about, well, you can't see at all. There you go, about 1/4 cup of cocoa. If you like your cookie cocoa, chocolate flavoring, cookie cocoa, whatever, oh, words. Then you're going to put down in your mixer, and you're just going to mix it on the lowest speed possible until your flour's incorporated. When it looks like it's starting to come together and your dough is almost completely mixed, this is when you add in your cornflakes or weetbix. So I'm now going to add in 1½ cups of crushed wheat biscuits. fairly sure other countries will have similar things, but this is what they look like. They're just like, I don't even know, crushed wheat. It's like a breakfast cereal. Anyway, I'm going to crush these into my cup. Should really do this over a bowl, but it's alright. You obviously didn't bake if you didn't make a mess in the kitchen. So 3 Weet-Bix gave me just over a cup. So I'm going to put that in and just do another 1.5 Weet-Bix. This is a really good way to use up those crumbs that are at the bottom of the box of cereal. This is what my mum used to do. She used to save them, and then when we had gone through maybe 2 packets, she would make Afghan biscuits with them. It was, oh, the Afghan biscuits were way better. So sometimes if there were a little extra, 1 biscuit left, just crumple it up and put the packet away. Don't tell her I told you that. And then you're just going to mix it again until it's all mixed through. At this point you don't want to mix it too much because you still want the Weet-Bix to be whole in there and crunchy. And I love this dough. So. Perfect. Now I'm going to shape them, roll them into little balls and put them on a plate in the fridge just to chill down before we bake them. So now I'm going to preheat my oven, 180 degrees Celsius on bake. Now that we've done that, we can weigh out and measure our Afghan dough. Alright, so now you've got your dough. When it comes to shaping them, there's generally 2 ways you can do this. You can either grab a tablespoon. I will grab a fresh one to show you. And you just grab a tablespoon amount, you grab it in your fingers, and you roll it into a ball, and then you have your Afghan. You can obviously make bigger ones than this. I just grabbed a small tablespoon to show you. Or the other way you can do it, if you want to be slightly more accurate and get even sizes, especially if you're doing it for baking, selling, like a cafe, anything like that, you're going to want to weigh them. So I'm going to start with 15 grams. Oh, that's double that. Like this. We're going to do 20 grams. This is 20. Then you do the same thing, you roll it into a ball. I have a plate on the side here. I'm just going to put them all on the plate, and then I'm going to put them in the fridge or even the freezer for like 10-20 minutes, and then we're going to bake them. When it comes to baking them, there's also 2 things you can do. So either you can squish them a little bit with a fork or the back of a spoon to get them to be a little bit flatter, or if you're chilling them, in my instance, you put them in the oven for maybe 4 to 5 minutes because they cook for a total of 20, and then you just get like the bottom of a measuring spoon, measuring cup, and you push them down a tiny bit when they're still in the oven. That's the method I'm going to show you today, but hopefully the other method sounds kind of self-explanatory and I didn't make it sound way more complicated than it is. So once you have all your cookie dough in the bowl here made into balls, you can bake them for 15 to 20 minutes. You want them to not look raw, and they should almost start like cracking on the top, but we'll get to that part. I'll see you when you've got all of them bowled and they're going in the fridge. And then I am finished my bowl. These are going to go into the freezer because I think I have more room in the freezer. I'm going to put them in the freezer for 10 minutes max. If you're putting them in the fridge, maybe go for 20, 30 max, and then you can bake them. Alright, so you're going to want a baking tray, and you're going to want either a silicone mat or line it with baking paper, greaseproof paper. I still don't have a tray that fits my mat, and I still don't have baking paper, so we're working with a slightly oversized pan, and it didn't mat, and it didn't bother or make any difference last time, so it's going to work this time. It's still quite small, so I might have to do 2 batches, but that's not the end of the world. It's time to get them out of the freezer. And here we are. Ideally you want them a little bit firmer than this, but this will do because they are cold. And we're just going to fit as many as we can on the mat here. They don't spread too much, but you are going to push them down a little bit. So my tray here, which isn't very big, I'm only going to be able to get 3 across. So the spacing is kind of like that. Oh, they're going to move when I try and show you, but like this. So I possibly could try and squeeze one more row in this way and go for 5 by 3, but I don't want to risk it, and I'm more than happy to bake 2 batches of cookies. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put it straight in my oven, which is already hot, and then I'm going to use this glass. No, I'm not going to use that one's not flat. I'm going to use the measuring cup that I used earlier, and I'm going to simply push down after 4 minutes. So I will show you that step in 4 minutes. Alrighty, so this is what they should look like. They should look like they're kind of glossy and starting to melt on the top, and if you look carefully on the bottom, they should be flat, or even they might be slightly more melted than mine even look. I don't know if you can see very well from the video. And then you just take a flat object with a flat bottom and you push them down just so that the tops are flat. So you don't need to push them down heaps, you still want them to be a nice thick biscuit. Also sometimes the edges crack and it just adds to the effect. You want them to do that. They look more rustic. Anyway, so this is what they look like after they've been pressed. They're still nice and thick, but they're more flat. Then we put them back in the oven, and they'll bake for another 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll see you with the finished product. Alright, so I went for the upper limit of the time thing, so it's been a total of 20 minutes, including the 4 minutes before we pushed them. And you can tell that they're done now because they're starting to crack on the tops and they don't look wet to the touch anymore. However, do not try and move them while they're hot. They need to cool down on the tray for like another 10 to 15 minutes so that when you don't pick them up, they don't crumble and fall to pieces. Learned that one the hard way the first time I made these. So be patient, let them cool for maybe 5-10 minutes, and then you can transfer this on the cooling rack. And I'm gonna have to do another batch, but I'm not gonna show you that. I'm gonna do this next batch of cookies and then we're gonna work on that icing. Alright, I'm back. One set of my cookies are pretty much completely cold, and I gotta say, if you want bigger Afghans, you definitely can. These would probably be considered mini ones. Like, if you look at it in the palm of my hand, it's quite small. So if you were looking for bigger Afghans, I'd say go for 30 grams. Potentially you can go even bigger, that's completely up to you, but I'd say 30 grams is probably the standard size. I've got mini ones. Now for the icing, you're going to want a tablespoon of softened or room temperature butter. I've left mine out on the bench, but I don't think it's quite soft enough. So I'm going to put it just here for a little bit and it will melt it because I don't have a microwave. The other option is to put it in the oven, but I'm not sure if that bowl is oven safe. So we're just gonna leave it there. So I've started to just mix it around. This is kind of what you want. You want it to be very, very soft and whipple. Now you're going to take your icing sugar and you want about just under a cup, almost a tablespoon less than a cup. I'm just going to slowly mix it in. But I can take a surprisingly large amount of icing sugar, so I find it best to just very slowly incorporate it. And then if you need more, you can add more. If you don't need more, you don't add any more. But also if you need to add some water, you can add some water. The consistency we're going for here is like a spreadable consistency, but still very, very firm, like almost to the point you can't move it because you obviously need it to set hard. I also recommend using a not super duper flimsy whisk. It would help. From here, once you have all that icing sugar included, you're going to want to add in a tablespoon, potentially 2, of cocoa powder. 1 and 2 of those. And then you whisk it again, just like the icing sugar. Of course. Like, who else would do that? This is why you should always wear an apron and not follow by my example, especially if you don't want to wreck your clothes. Now eventually you'll get a very, very thick icing that keeps getting stuck in a whisk like this, which is great. So now I'm going to switch utensils to a spoon so that it doesn't keep getting stuck, and I can add a little bit more icing sugar. Then I'm going to add a tiny bit of hot water, not even a whole tablespoon's worth. We should probably try it, shouldn't we? Always try your icings. You can definitely taste the cocoa. That was a good amount, 2 tablespoons. I'm going to add in a pinch more of this. I'd say potentially start with 1 cup. It's way more than necessary. And I mean from the beginning, start with a cup. Don't add another whole cup. Jeepers. You would end up with such a dry icing. You wouldn't even be able to get it in. So the consistency I had before was pretty much bang on, just a little bit too soft still. And now I've probably gone a touch over. So we're going to add in the tiny bit of magical hot water, or like balled ice cream. Anyway, it's very, very, very thick. Just a splash. More than enough. This is going to do 2 things. It's going to soften up your icing yet again, but it's also going to melt the butter a little bit more, so it would have unmelted a little bit since we started mixing. This is the kind of consistency you want, right? It doesn't come off my spoon and it'll set hard. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to grab a little bit of icing, like it's enough that I can stick it in my hands, right? It doesn't stick. So I'm going to grab a tiny bit of icing, stick it on my Afghan. Hold up, I'm not prepared for this. Don't get caught off guard like me. For this part, you're going to need a cup of hot water and a clean spoon. And you put a ball-sized or a dollop amount of ice cream, and you get a hot spoon, and you just smooth it out in the middle there. And then you have an Afghan with this one probably a tiny bit too much icing for its size. Then to garnish it off and to make it look pretty, you grab a walnut half or a walnut piece and you stick it on top. Just like that. That's quite a small piece. We'll just put a second one on there. And then this is your finished Afghan. Doesn't it look adorable? I'm going to do all of them and then we'll come back. Now if you're nut free or can't have tree nuts, you can substitute it for any other nut, or you can sprinkle a little bit of desiccated coconut, the really fine ground coconut, on top instead of the walnut. Alrighty, I'm all done and I left a few blank, as you can see in that corner there. And I'm going to say that it's for people, weird people, who do not like icing or can't have walnuts. But the reality is that I ran out of icing and it's probably just going to be me and Connor that eat them. And I know that he will eat walnuts and icing. But the best part, I almost forgot, is the taste test. So cheers and let's try them. The biscuit's good. It's completely cooked through. The icing isn't firm yet. I haven't put them in the fridge, which would probably cause the icing to set, which would make them even better. So if you want to try them, I'd say put them in the fridge for a little bit to cool down. And the wheat-bix are nice and crunchy. They add a little bit of texture. It's really, really good. The biscuit itself isn't super duper sweet. However, the icing is ridiculously sweet. So if you were thinking you might add some sugar to the biscuits, don't, unless you're leaving them plain. Really good. I was really happy this week. I hope you have enjoyed, and I really hope you make these. Like, these are amazing recipe. I love them. Everybody loves them. These will not last long. I swear I say that every week, but it's true. Everything's already gone. That's all I have for you. Peace out. Till next week.
Living life every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.